Casey.
That's Concordia. Ireland is in the midst of an unprecedented housing crisis. Homeless levels have soared to over 10,000, including almost 4,000 children. The number of people homeless and living in emergency accommodation is at a new record levels. Latest figures show that in March there were 10,305 adults and children without a home and living in hotels, bed and breakfast and family hubs. An increase of over 41 on the previous month. The number of children in emergency accommodation now stands at 3,821, a rise of 37 in a month. The social housing waiting list, including HAP recipients, is over 110,000. It is incredible that with all these facts that the Fine Gael general election candidate can publicly say that there is no housing crisis outside Dublin. To say that there is no housing crisis outside Dublin is to show an appalling ignorance, at best, of the crisis being experienced in all commuter belt counties such as Wicklow and Wexford, and even beyond the commuter belt. In Wicklow, a one-bedroom apartment will cost over €1,000 to rent, while a mortgage will cost €663, according to yesterday's DAF rental report. A two-bedroom house will currently cost an average of €1,173 in Wicklow, while a mortgage can be reached for €911. Supply of homes is the issue, not the right to them. It is the state's inability to build enough homes where there is plenty of available land that is the heart of our current national crisis. Ireland is currently experiencing a severe housing crisis like many other countries. There are growing calls for Ireland to emulate countries like Germany, Netherlands and South Africa and ensuring a constitutional right to housing. Ireland has ratified the International Convention on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, which prescribes for the state to take all appropriate means to provide for the right to adequate housing based on the availability of resources. The Irish Constitution also contains certain explicit property rights, but there is currently no clear statutory right to adequate housing which can be legally enforced by the Irish courts. Any amendments to the Irish Constitution or any approach to legislate further rights to housing will have to be balanced to the rights of landowners. In 1982, the court found that the Rent Restriction Act, which obliged landlords to accept below-market rents, was an unjust attack on property owners' constitutional property rights. Nonetheless, there has been successful legislation measures to assist with meeting social housing needs, such as the Part 5 of the Planning and Development Act 2000, which provides that up to 10% of new housing development must be reserved for social housing. The Constitutional Convention found in favour of inserting a right to housing in the Constitution in March 2004 as part of its consideration of broader economic, cultural and social rights. Fianna Fáil rejected a similar bill 2 years ago on the grounds that the Finance Committee be tasked with assessing the concept of economic, cultural and social rights in the Constitution. However, that work has not been sufficiently progressed to date, and the Government must address this matter as urgent. Holding a referendum will cost approximately €15 million, the same as building 75 social housing units. It's important that we prioritise building and clear solid measures to address the crisis. In Wicklow, 75 social housing units would be a significant development in any part of the county. Last year, only 28 units were completed, while our housing list currently stands at over 4,126. We prefer a legislative approach to the problem initially, followed by a deeper discussion on the constitutional protections. Any change to the Constitution that involves handing powers to judges may have unforeseen consequences and must be clearly considered. That's why Fianna Fáil supports a legislative approach to the right to housing, followed by a debate on the constitutional changes. We should have all learned the lessons of playing politics with our Constitution from partisan political gain. A botched referendum could result in a lengthy and divisive debate on the nature of property rights at a time when we need to encourage housing development at the rental and affordable markets. It's unclear what the impact of the Sinn Féin amendment would have on the Constitution and the subsequent legal cases. The Constitutional Convention was divided on the specific option to take in terms of the realisation of the right to housing, i.e. immediate, gradual or progressive. This has been a major impact on public policy and should be weighted up carefully. It is not clear in the wording on Sinn Féin's insertion what the impact would be. This needs to be debated further. While the Government has delayed committee discussions, this does not mean it should be completely bypassed by a unilateral private member's bill by one party. With rent levels at such high, a whole generation cannot save enough to own a home, while vulnerable householders are at risk of homelessness. Home ownership is slipping away from an entire generation, as housing prices rise at 13% per annum, while wages are only growing at 2.5%. The 68% home ownership is the lowest since 1971. Fianna Fáil has shown its commitment to finding meaningful solutions through their role in confidence supply, and has not shirked away from leading criticism of governments where it is at fault. The key test for the Government is delivery. Since coming into power, Fine Gael have launched Construction 2020, Social Housing Strategy 2020, Rebuilding Ireland 2016, the 2012 Capital Programme, 2015 Capital Programme and the 2018 Capital Programme. These 6 separate plans, excluding the number of relaunches involved, that is more launches than local authority homes built in several counties so far this year. This needs to change. It's clear the legal framework around housing needs to be reviewed. However, we should do so carefully with full consideration of the consequences, not a knee-jerk party political change. Fianna Fáil is opposed to this bill, which is more about optics than addressing the housing crisis. We need further discussions on what changes we should be made to the Constitution. The Government must address their failure to progress discussion on the Constitutional Convention recommendations on these issues. While there are quicker and more important ways to address the housing crisis, we do need to discuss the legal framework around housing rights. Fianna Fáil supports initially putting this right on a legislative basis with further exploration of the constitutional protection in the committee system. Any change to the Constitution must always be weighed up carefully to avoid unforeseen circumstances. It should not be hijacked by any political party seeking a quick headline before election day. For the record, my personal view, which I have stated here before, is that the right to housing is a constitutional imperative clearly implied in the common good clause of the property rights article. The common good of the right to housing, the right to a home, to shelter, needs careful and serious discussion before any referendum proposal. The Irish people as a whole need to be part of that discussion. Thank you, Les Kincora.